I've been sitting here wondering this afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m., the Bureau of Land Management in Twin Falls is having an open house at its new consolidated facility. And I've been wondering if a show of strength is going to be displayed for the public that comes by. You can have Ammon Bundy trundled through the parking lot now that he is in federal custody. 7 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. So please drop by this afternoon, visit these people, and find out what plans they have for you. The shootout, so-called shootout, yesterday in Oregon, after a routine traffic stop, making you wonder exactly what was routine about it. You've got 6 people in custody, and the one person who was probably seemed to be the calmest, nicest guy who was taking part in the sit-in at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, that's Robert LaVoy Finicum, is dead. According to Ammon Bundy, he was shot while his hands were up. Now, if he happened to be a liberal or a criminal like Michael Brown from Ferguson, Missouri, media would run with that story and say, well, gee willikers, look what the police did. That poor 6'4", 300-pound black teenager shot by that 5'7" cop when his hands were up and he said, don't shoot. And, of course, all of the other drug dealers in the neighborhood said that's exactly what happened, so we believe it, and we're going to make that the lead story. But in this case, the media will not tell you that that happened. They'll tell you that Mr. Finicum, who was a slightly built man, was likely knocking police officers and federal agents over in the highway, and they had to take him out. The man seemed to know that his life was going to be cut short. He had been telling reporters for the last several weeks he was ready to die, and that he felt he could not spend the rest of his life in a prison cell because he wouldn't have a bedroll where he could go out into the desert and look at the stars. And on Monday this week, he sat down with a reporter from the Oregonian out of Portland, and he gave a short interview about what he expected. He also said it looked as if the federal government was about ready to close in.
We should have as much dialogue and openness as possible. Have you felt the change in the tone and tenor of the feds out there? We certainly have. We used to could walk up to them and talk with the FBI agents in a friendly manner, unarmed and stuff, but the tenor has changed. They have become more hardened. And when they step out of their vehicles, now they're stepping out with their rifles. And they're not willing to engage in just friendly dialogue. And so, and then I'm assuming that you're aware of all the extra vehicles that they're bringing in and the increase in manpower that they're ramping up. And we're saying, why the rattling of the saber? Why, when we're so far away from anybody out here in the middle of nowhere, why are you ramping it up? Why do you fly your planes over nonstop? And why do you have your drones? Because they're droning this now. And they're actually flying their photographer planes. They're doing all the things. They're doing all the things that shows that they want to take some kinetic action against us. And we're saying, why be so unfriendly? Why be so threatening? Why are you threatening lethal force when we are so far away?
Did I mention, by the way, that there is an open house this afternoon in Twin Falls at the new facility of the Bureau of Land Management from 4 to 6 p.m.? Beware. You've got to watch out for these federal bureaucrats because they can be a very dangerous crowd. The man you just heard speaking is dead, killed yesterday on a highway in Oregon while going to a public meeting to have a discussion with local people about what was going on. Going to a public meeting, expecting safe passage, and he's dead. Now, I don't like to indict law enforcement until I know more details, but there are so few details coming out about this right now. I almost get the impression it's going to be a little bit like Ruby Ridge was back in the early 1990s, when the government tried to claim that Randy Weaver's dog shot first. And, of course, you had a lot of people who were worried about losing their pensions, and they stuck to that story no matter how ridiculous and absurd it happened to seem. 8:11. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program this morning at 736-0300, 736-0300. Again, Michael Brown from Ferguson, Missouri, hands up, don't shoot. It was a lie, but the media perpetuated that. The media will not believe this story this time. They'll go along with whatever the government tells them. If this had been the Black Lives Matter group or Occupy demonstrators raping people in parks or crapping on police cars, the media today would be demanding an explanation and saying that the government was out of control. But because the fellow travelers in establishment media, because those people themselves don't like white American ranchers, it's okay. You can go ahead and kill them. It's a bit like President Obama going to Detroit this week and saying that the government in Michigan erred and it is now poisoning people in Flint, Michigan because of tainted water. Yet he's never once talked about the spill by his own EPA that contaminated rivers in 3 states here in the Southwest, and I assume because he doesn't care if a bitter clinger dies. That is, the people in flyover country. You may remember that. They cling to their guns and their God, as he pointed out during a campaign stop many, many years ago. 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Or you can reach me by email at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. You're up next, and you're on the air on News Radio 1310, KLIX.
Wow, what a shocker. They threatened federal officers, and federal officers shot them. Oh, my God. Now, you know what? I never saw that one coming. Really?
So how do you feel? Are you happy that Gringo is dead? You're happy that Gringo is dead? You'd like some more? Hello? And maybe the government can send you a check or something and make you feel all better. Maybe you can go take over Mr. Finicum's ranch. Maybe the government can split that up and give it to people who don't work for a living. Is that what this is all about? You went ahead and you got one whitey, and that's all that really matters? 736-0300. 736-0300. Mr. Finicum, from all intents and purposes, father of 11 children, grandfather of 19. And he also raised a dozen foster children and had been the head of a foster family for decades, doing the right thing, and he's now dead. And that guy you just called in, he's getting his rocks off over that. 814. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. The only thing that was left out there was Riva. These are Democrats. That needs to be said. These are Democrats that shot these ranchers.
Well, the Democrat who runs the state of Oregon, who is, I should point out, a bisexual living in an open marriage. Her husband is okay with her sleeping with both other men and women. She had called last week for the execution of these people. So now she's got the blood. She's satisfied the bloodlust that she has.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You're right, Bill. All right, thank you.
Thank you much for the call, sir. You're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Bill, at one time, there was only one person who decided that we needed to be free from King George. And in essence, we ended up, writing the Declaration of Independence and winning our freedom. And whether or not we like or dislike what is going on with the Bundys, the awareness level it's been a great thing for people in the West and what is going on here. And so it's what happened is truly a tragedy, and we have to gather together because, again, like I keep saying, it crashes through your front door. Sure, Finicum was proactive, and but you see, the rest of us can't ignore what he did. And then one more point, if he was laying on the ground with it, submitting, how did he get shot in the face? And I'll hang up.
I thank you much for the call, sir. That is a great, great question. Be great to get an answer from the federal government soon, but I imagine it is going to take a very, very long time. And yes, apparently his dog, like Randy Weaver's dog, will have opened fire first. 25 right now at 8:16, and you're up next. You're on Top Story.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. When you're talking about Randy Weaver, you can't forget about his wife standing there in that threatening position with a fully automatic suckling baby.
Yes, shot through a screen door by one of these guys who just couldn't wait to take a little pleasure in killing an unarmed woman holding a child.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Thank you much for the telephone call, sir. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. More on this story. Cliven Bundy chiming in. Apparently, Fox News got in touch with him late yesterday by telephone, and he offered some thoughts as well about his sons. One of his sons wounded in the shooting yesterday. Finicum, Mr. Finicum, of course, killed, and 6 arrested.
I feel like my sons are on good missions, doing good things, helping people. They weren't threatening nobody. You know, we have faith that whatever's happening is good, but when we're getting people arrested and killed, it's not good. We got people up there trying to do good, trying to teach, trying to help that community, trying to help the Hammonds from their problems. Ammon's wife called us, and she said that Ammon, from the back of the police car, called her and told her that they had been arrested. LaVoy Finicum was murdered, cold-blooded murdered. They shot him with his hands up and just literally murdered him.
And this morning, I'm amazed how little attention this is getting in mainstream media across the country. And if you go to the comment sections of places that actually are covering it, you see the bloodlust from the liberals who are just drooling over this. It excites them so much because they think that this is the beginning for them, that they can go out and kill everybody between Los Angeles and New York who gets in the way of their plans. 818, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yes, maybe this would be a good time for Butch Otter to step back and say, well, maybe we don't need federal lands in the state of Idaho anymore.
Somebody here in the western states eventually is going to have to pick up that baton, and apparently, thank you for the call, nobody is willing really to stand in and do that. Is there that much fear? I don't think it's going to come down to numbers. These dozen men, and there's still a handful out there at the reservation or the refuge, they're there all alone. But at least they're taking a stand. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley.
Good morning, Bill. My question is, with all the notoriety that the FBI was going to do that, they should have been wearing body cams. They should have had some sort of camera crew or something like that there. Where is the evidence from their body cams?
I'm sure there's going to be some tape. I mean, you would expect that because if the state police were also involved, they'll have a camera on the dashboard. So something will be available at some point. It's just, I don't think, we're less than 24 hours away, and I thank you for the call. We're less than 24 hours away, so we may not see a lot of this for another week or a month, but it's there. I'm sure it's there. It's a darn shame that LaVoy Finicum wasn't wearing some sort of body armor, because that very calm, soft-spoken man, good, hard-working rancher would still be with us today. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. None of this would have happened if the President of the United States would have offered an olive branch and released Dwight and Stephen Hammond from prison with a pardon. Then everyone could have gone home and all of these other issues could have been negotiated. But you know what, again? These are just bitter clingers. So what if a few of them die, right? Did I mention that Bureau of Land Management is having an open house at its new facility in Twin Falls this afternoon from 4 until 6 o'clock? Again, I wonder if they'll address some of the concerns people have about being shot who cross the federal government. Do want to mention, coming up in about 10 minutes on this program, Russell Singleton scheduled to join us. He's a physician assistant at Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, Idaho, talking about the end of meaningful use, goals, the good and the bad of that program, perspective on government intervention in healthcare, how Tripp Family Medicine has benefited, and how Tripp Family Medicine continues to move forward and practice your health your way. That's coming up in just a few minutes. We do Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine every Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And Tripp Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. Remember, life's too short not to feel good. If you'd like to reach our program this morning, 736-0300, 736-0300. You realize the half a dozen people who are still left at the Malheur Wildlife Reservation or Refuge, I get those two words confused, but they're similar, I guess, in the background, that their chances of getting out of there alive have been significantly diminished over the course of the last 24 hours. This comes from the Oregonian. The FBI and the Oregon State Police jointly reported 5 people arrested and 1 unnamed person was killed in connection with an occupation. You see, the media is taking the words directly from the government. Occupation of the wildlife refuge. And then there's the full news release here that explains how this happened, 4:25 p.m. That would have been, 5:25 p.m. our time yesterday. But we need to point out there were other people arrested. There was a fellow by the name of Pete Santilli. He is from, I believe, Ohio. Pete Santilli is a talk show host. He's since moved his program from radio to YouTube. And he organized the march through Burns, Oregon a few weeks ago. He was not behind the plans, though, for the what you call camping at the refuge. In fact, he was a little surprised that all of that took place. But because he has become a mouthpiece for this, and he can go on YouTube anytime live and tell people what's going on, apparently the government's decided to shut him down. And that's the latest part of this, is if we can remove the First Amendment, then the government can pretty much willy-nilly do whatever it likes. You're up next. You're on the air on Top Story.
Yeah, good day, mate. Yeah, we've got a saying down under, don't grab a Tasmanian devil by the tail in mating season. At the risk of grabbing your tail, I'd just like to point out a couple of things. You keep kind of painting the BLM with a very broad brush. They don't run the Federal Wildlife Refuge System. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does. Well, it's not the BLM that apparently they had a beef with. Yeah, grazing here on wildlife refuges, the closest one that comes to mind is the Minidelka. I've seen cows out there. I think most of the federal wildlife refuges around here, they graze cows. No one seems to have a terrific problem with it. As for the hands up, I think this will come out. I'm sure there'll be a civil suit, and I'm sure that the facts will come out. I saw something on your local channel one time. They were interviewing these blokes, and the one bloke there said the FBI, they're terrorists. The FBI, they're terrorists. All these law enforcement people, they're terrorists. Well, I think ISIS are terrorists. I think those blokes in France, they're terrorists. But I have a hard time believing that your FBI is terrorists. Now, I know I'm familiar with what the excesses of Ruby Ridge, and that came out. That came out in the civil suit. That came out. Your court system works. So I would say I think it'll come out, and I've got a hard time believing if they were going to gun them all down, they'd all be dead, not just the one fella.
Well, two things. Calling someone a terrorist is not always nice, but it is permissible. I mean, it is legal under the First Amendment to the Constitution. Number two, this all started with the BLM, with the dispute with the Hammond family. So ultimately, it all goes back to that issue.
All right. Well, I would just say if you go to the open house, I think some of this is a bit of theater on your part. I understand that. You've got to make ratings. You do. I listen. I tune in. I'd like to have a beer with you sometime. You seem like a pretty nice bloke. Maybe a bit wrong on this issue, Bill, but I just say don't. You know what to do. I think you're a pretty level-headed bloke, but the BLM doesn't manage the fish and wildlife. It doesn't manage the refuge. As far as I know, I don't know if there were BLM law enforcement there, range people. I don't know. Like I said, I think the facts will come out. Personally, I don't know what came out. I just found it odd that only one was shot. I think the others may have probably complied. Sounds as if that this bloke wanted to die, but that was he had some sort of suicide wish now.
Well, I thank you much for the call, and I think that he had pointed that out, that he would just as soon die rather than go off to a prison. And I think you're right about the other point there when you say that we'll know a lot more. We probably will in about a week's time to a month's time. We'll put it all together. Hey, speaking of the Tasmanian devil. After all of the reference, how can you avoid not playing that? 8:30, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It is true, the local office of the Bureau of Land Management has an open house today in Twin Falls from 4 until 6 o'clock. Probably they will not want to talk to you about this subject.